welcome to For Fantasy's Sake, the Quad City's first and only fantasy show. I am your host, Doug, and we are here with Chris this evening. We are here to discuss A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And so, what did you think about this week's episode, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, how was your watch, really, man? It's quite the open, and I think we talked about the opening the previous episode as well, setting a tone for things. They're definitely doing a thing here where you start off the episode and you get greeted by just a lot of things you didn't really expect to see.
Some very large things that you didn't expect to see. No. On top of
It,
so I didn't get a chance to watch it until this afternoon. So I had heard that the show opened with a large instrument, but I was not prepared for said actual visual. I was also not prepared to see it in use. That was also that I managed to miss. So I was a little bit caught aback by the whole opening of the episode.
Well, I know we have our football shows, so the Minnesota Vikings out there probably are very interested in finding out exactly where that came from and how they can get some of those on hand for the rest of their team.
Yes. But behind the scenes said it was a prosthetic, so it was not a natural item.
I would hope so.
Yes, because that'd be impressive either way. They basically said it was his gift because they spent the rest of the episode basically shitting on him and saying how terrible of a knight and kind of what of a person he was. So we got to give him one thing, and that's what they chose to give him.
Well, I mean, the gods of the Seven Kingdoms don't take with both hands, obviously, and it takes both hands to, hold up certain things. So that's the way it goes.
Yes, very much so. Once we get past that point, and we are back into what we will call modern times, we got a kind of a different story. We actually see Dunk trying to find his way into the tournament. He finally finds himself a sponsor to get in there. We see a little bit more of his relationship with Egg as well. And then we also see our favorite Baratheon pops in for a little bit, and then gets thirsty and pops out of line for a few moments. But let's kind of take those in kind of the three pieces. So the 4 pieces, because we want to talk about him getting in the tournament and then the tournament itself. So we'll split those kind of up into 2 pieces. What did you think of his? He was very dogged in his search to find somebody to let him in. Lesser men would have given up, I think, after being rejected so many times, but he kept persevering on. What did you think of his efforts to try and find a sponsor?
I thought it kind of just showed that he really didn't have anything else. This was his entire goal and what he has decided that the meaning of his life is at this point. So there was no denying him. But I thought it was really interesting to see a Targaryen kind of and shown as a good guy for a change. Like you have somebody who actually cares and he knows a little bit about this hedge knight that nobody cares about. He remembers him, and that's I think it was kind of a nice turn because you just get used to them being we're the bad guy for the bad guy's sake, and 1 out of every 3 is just supposed to be not quite right in the head. So I mean, what you see here, it doesn't really fit with what we expect of them, and I think that was kind of nice from this show too.
Yeah, it did take that and kind of turn it on its head a little bit. He did seem to be fairly sane. Even his brother, who was a jerk, still seemed to be sane, which means that the kids are definitely going to be batshit crazy. when they show up
I mean,
next.
yeah, and I think we've gotten a little taste of that. There's the arrogance that's always going along with them, and it's something where we've come to expect it to a certain degree. So I think that yeah, you're right. It's a show that really operates in the gray for the most part, but this
Mhm.
show doesn't seem to want the gray as much. It wants there to be, here's the side of good, there's a side of evil to this. It doesn't want there to be that in between. It wants it to be more black and white. And I think that's something that's unique and different from a Game of Thrones show because we don't really get that in a lot of places.
Right. It's really showing us the haves and the have-nots of kind of how those two things are split. Um,
Yeah.
where we can really see. I mean, Dunk had to sell his spoilers for later on, but he had to sell his horse. He was
Mhm.
bartering with the armor guy. He's barely making ends meet eating beef jerky for dinner. While these other knights and these other lords are eating well and basically getting stuff just kind of handed to them.
Mhm.
So
And I
really kind of juxtaposed that way. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I thought it was kind of interesting to see Dunk really take like solace in, oh, there are people out there like me that went from rags to riches, or I guess in the case of the Targaryens, riches to riches, it sounds like, because even that story is a complete lie because he goes from being the biggest like fishmonger that there is and being a part of like this giant monopoly to a part of the King's Guard. But the way that he's telling that tale makes it seem like, oh, I started off right where you are. And if you keep at it, someday you'll be where I am. I think that also just kind of tells you that when you're a part of the palace, that lying just comes that easy to you. And Dunk throughout this episode is highlighting how poorly he puts together his words and thoughts. And
Yes.
it's highlighted by Egg absolutely like slamming him at the end of the
Dunking
episode.
on him. Yes.
Yeah, we got our next dunk in, Doug. It's good.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you could really see that. But Dunk is aware that he's not a man of verbosity, um, because he goes to talk to the nice puppet lady, asks her to paint his shield for him, and later on he's like, "I blew that, didn't I?" And Egg's like, "Yep, you screwed that one up royally."
But he
Poor
has
guy.
to jump in and he has to save him a little bit there. And I think that shows that he is, like you said, he's a little more worldly than Dunk is. He's got an idea of like how to frame things and talk about things. And then he knew the entire profile of Donnell of Dirksville too. He knew that he was the owner of half of the crabbing fleets in Westeros. So I feel like they're kind of setting things up for Egg to have some sort of past with the Westeros like kingdom, or maybe with the Tyrells, because it feels like that's what they're angling at. Because the minute the Tyrells showed up and their banners are flying, we also see Egg just go, "Well, I'm gonna take the horses. I'm gonna get them back," and he's out
He's
after
like,
that.
"That's my time to go." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He's also very much a Knight fanboy too, which I think um,
Mhm.
help. He brings that where where we see him be very world wise. That's the side where we get to see him bring out kind of that childlike enthusiasm, where he knows all the names of the knights and he knows all of their D&D stats for lack of a better term, um, and is excited to watch him get in there and fight and joust. Um, we saw him standing up and screaming, and he was just having a great time. And then even after the battles, he's pretended with a stick, just like every other little boy has ever done.
Right.
You know, you have a stick, you got a sword, and you're out there slaying dragons in the backyard. So where he's normally kind of the voice of reason of the group or of the duo and kind of the mature one, we get to see that kind of flipped around, and then we get to see Dunk's big speech at the end of, okay, screw all these guys for not remembering my master. I'm just going to go out there and kick everybody's ass and make them remember him.
Yeah. I think it's very much about legacy and the fact that he, like Egg says in the first episode, uh, when it comes to, do you know every night? I know the good ones. And
Right.
he kind of pulls out the receipts in this one too, because when he sees Prince Valar, he knows him on sight. I guess that's not a big deal to know who the prince is of, the Seven Kingdoms, but he knows him on sight, and he just has a really good knowledge of all of the players and the architecture within the Targaryen house, which makes me think there's a little bit of something there.
Yes.
But it's interesting to me that it is about legacy, because you see the Targaryens, they show up, they're acting like, everything is the same, they're on top, they've got everything going for them. But this is like their first appearance, like post dragons. So there's a little bit of a loss there where, they're not the guys they used to be. They're like, if we were putting it in football context, it's like the University of Michigan right now, where, they have the pedigree and the history and everything, but right now you're like, oh boy, they're a little bit of a mess, and I don't know if they're going to get it back. I think that's kind of where the Targaryens are at this point in time.
Yeah, I can see a Targaryen messing around with a teaching assistant too. So yeah, I can see that. See that. Much more like Michigan than we think that they are.
But it have to be in the family to fit the
Yes.
scenario for the Targaryens, but it's still, nonetheless.
Still, yes. Nevertheless, it still fits. Um, yes. So we see kind of that journey there with him with Dunk taking the. Let's try that again. We see Dunk's kind of growth throughout this episode, or the realization, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for, of his that his master was he was maybe a good man, but he maybe wasn't the best knight because, like you said, he lived till he was 60. He never won a tournament. He fought in battles, but nobody remembers him. He was a cog in the wheel, but he was not a big cog in the wheel. I
Mhm.
think is the best way to put that. He was out there, he was doing his part, but a lot of time, but he didn't do anything big to put him on the map.
Yeah. I think he was more of a piece of dirt that the wheel ran over at one point and then became a part of the wheel, and that's about as high as he can get. Because you're right, he never won anything. Nobody remembers him, but he was a man who lived a life, and I think that's what's important to Dunk, is that he's now past that legacy to Dunk, and what's he gonna do with it to be this person who, well, I have to be better than my master, but he taught me everything that he knows, and he's this guy who never won anything, and he never did anything that was memorable in anybody else's eyes. How can I be better than that? How are you going to be better than that?
Yeah, and he gets his eyes opened up a little bit when we go to the jousting at the end of the episode, where these guys are doing riding tricks and hanging off a horse and picking up a shield on the go. Excuse me, and really kind of putting out quite the display. And he's like, "Oh, I'm a little outgunned here. I'm stepping into the NBA All Star game as as a regular dude, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
go try and guard Jordan and Magic and all these guys. So
Mhm.
it's a interesting juxtaposition there that he's kind of the light bulbs coming on as he's like, I got a long road ahead of
I think we got to at least see him fight a little bit in the cutaways. I do like the cutaways. I like that they're a little bit of a smash cut, but the more they lean on it, the more it makes me feel like it's the Family Guy sketch where they're just gonna do a cutaway to something like, that, reminds you of something else. it feels a little bit like that. And I know they have a monopoly on basically that cutaway and it being their gag, but it feels like it may overstay its welcome over these 6 episodes, which we're a third of the way through this show, and we are still kind of getting character introductions at this point. So we haven't really covered a lot of ground, but we got to see Dunk fight at least for a moment. And I think we just saw that
Oh,
he's powerful. We don't know his actual caliber of ability still. So that's a big question mark.
yeah. That is. I think what we're going to see if the story plays out the way that if the story plays out with a happy ending, and I know the rule is there are no happy endings in Game of Thrones, but we know that he goes on to great things, and this is supposed to be the catalyst. So if this is step one, he's going to be riding beginner's luck the whole way because these guys are big and bad, and they've been training their whole life to do this. He's a he's ridden a horse. We know he's done that. Um, we don't know if he's carried a lance. We don't know. We saw him sparring with his. We saw him sparring with his master, but we don't know kind of what his skills are beyond that. He wouldn't spar with the other guy. With the other, was it? No, it was a Lannister that asked
Yeah.
him last week. Yeah, to ask him to spar, and he refused that. So we don't really kind of know where his skill set is. But you have to kind of think that they're building this as an underdog story, that he's going to have some kind of massive riding wave of luck to get him to the finals to
Mhm.
spur on his great adventures.
Well, I don't even know if it was a Lannister who was fighting him. They have like an apple emblem on the front of their like coat of arms. So in my mind, I always refer to them in my head as the Apple Dumpling Gang, and so they are always like going to have that name in my mind. But yeah, I think you're right there that we do get to see that. And I started to think also when you're getting the story about, oh, I was simple crabber and then I became part of the King's Guard. I also wondered if this was maybe Baylor doing something a little underhanded here, where he's gonna set up Dunk against one of the Targaryens who may not be as accomplished in order to like build up their rep because he sees, okay, look, here's your pound of flesh for this guy. He has no idea what's going on. You better get him. And so that way they set it up where, you've got hungry and wants to win against doesn't really care and may not be like too like locked in. Maybe that's how we get our first victory here. But I guess
Yes,
it's not our first victory.
which Rocky movie is this? Because somebody described this very much as he's Rocky. So I'm like, which Rocky movie is it that he fights a guy who's kind of just there for the paycheck?
Well, you can call it the first one, you can call it the second one. I stopped watching after that. But Creed was amazing. I was a big fan of that. But yeah, probably Rocky 1, Rocky 2. Maybe Rocky 2 is a better analogy because in that one, Rocky actually does win. So there you go. That's where
There
you
you
got
go.
to draw the lines.
All right, I like it. I did want to ask, how did you like the tribute to Ozzy with the guy with the Tully biting the head off the live fish and throwing it into the crowd?
I didn't catch that that was what that was supposed to be. I thought it was just like some flavor in there, but that's nice that they did that.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually did it as a tribute to Ozzy, but biting off the head of any animal obviously makes you think of.
Draws that analogy, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, instantly.
yes, yeah. I was because the first time when I watched it, I was like, "Is that a?" I'm like, "What is that? Is that a fish? Is that a rat? What is that?" And then I was like, "Oh, it's an homage to Ozzy." So,
Mhm. But
but I liked it.
yeah, and I think we did get our first real victory here because you get the tug of war that the
Mhm.
Dunk is the linchpin in that whole victory for their team
Yeah.
there.
Yes, And we got to see both Dunk and Egg kind of use their best skills. Where Baratheon, like we said, he decides to take a water break in the middle of the competition. So we get to see Dunk kind of use his overwhelming strength and dig his heels in and really kind of pull the team along. We also see Egg use his smarts where he lifts his feet off the ground so they can't pull him over the
Mm,
line. So because he's hanging in the air. So
yeah.
that gives them an extra couple of feet of clearance to work with there. And then by the time that Lord Baratheon decides he's willing to jump back into the fray and then kind of finishes it off. Excuse me. And somebody else had made the comment of, that was definitely the thing of the working man versus the ruling class, where the working man was doing all the work to win that competition, and then the ruling class comes in at the end, does the minimal amount, and gets to take all the credit for it.
That's the most Baratheon way to fight. You wander off because you got bored and you didn't want to do it anymore. You come
Mm-hmm.
back right at the end to claim victory and make it all about you at the end. So
Yeah,
it's perfect.
perfect. Yep. Yeah, I that was a great moment. I love that one. That was actually probably the funniest moment in the episode to me, where he's just walking around calling people names, and then he decides to jump back in at the end. I thought that was great.
I liked that a lot too. I think that fit back with Egg's whole like undercurrent from this episode of what makes them better. What do you what do you not have that they do have? And maybe he needs to break down that wall for Dunk a little bit because right now, if he's going into these fights thinking that everybody's better than him, that he has no reason to be there, he's not going to win any of these fights either. So maybe he has to break down that wall a little bit, and this was a way to do that.
He is definitely thinking that he's the luckiest one there, though, because as he was describing what he wanted to be for his sigil on his shield, Egg's like, you do the tree, blah 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 blah, and he's like, no, and I want the shooting star too. That was like his one contribution because he thinks, that's a big piece of it. So we'll see how that works out. Like I said, the way that they have the setup, obviously that's the way it's going to go. But it's nice to see that little bit of that touch of he actually believes that the luck is on his side.
Well, it's a little bit of their intermixing and becoming one there too. It's an acknowledgement of kind of Egg's role because it would not have happened. He wouldn't have been aware of it if not for Egg telling him. So, I mean, that's kind of the two worlds meeting there too, because he's got the old guard of his previous master with the shield. The shield no longer represents his old master. He needs a new one, and to incorporate Egg into it in that way, I think that's a good moment without them really calling it out there.
Yeah. Even and you can see that, yeah, you're right, because even earlier on in the episode, he was like, I can still get rid of you at the drop of a hat, but he goes so far as to basically let him design his own sigil. So
Mhm.
that's, he's really kind of accepted him kind of as his squire and his right hand man at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we got a little bit of an introduction to, I can't probably say her name correctly, Tensley,
Something like
the wo
the pup.
the woman who's gonna paint the shield. Um,
Yes.
I think that she's gonna play a more, uh heavier role as the show kind of progresses on to because when you look at shows like this, you usually have the three main characters. One is the brains, one is the brawn, and one is kind of the heart. And so maybe because we're seeing the artistic side of her, she's going to be the one who ends up being the heart side of it. And then you get a couple more together, and you got yourself a Captain Planet there. So that's
Yeah.
the way it goes.
Yes. Um, yes. She did seem to be like him at least a little bit. She at least liked him well enough to take the commission. Now, obviously,
Right.
money's money, but there does seem to be something a little there a little chemistry there. Um, Maybe not as much as he hopes or thinks, but there's a little something there. There's a little spark.
Yeah. And I think I was looking back at what we said about the first episode in last week and how this was supposed to be the funnier version of Game of Thrones too. And I don't know that it's not necessarily supposed to be funny, but it might just be the absence of the show being bleak that makes us think that, oh, it's funny now. So yeah, it's not like it's not torturing me every week or being abusive to me every week. So it's got to be funny, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we haven't chopped anybody's heads off, so that's hilarious.
And as we were kind of starting to wrap things up, I really love the kid. I know that child actors, sometimes it's just like, oh boy, we got to deal with this for a while. He he's fantastic, and just like the emotional like range that he shows, like the excitement it hits on a lot of really good levels. So, I mean, you like to see that kind of acting because it doesn't happen very often, especially with kids. And I think
Yeah,
hearing the background stuff, like the behind the scenes, like after episode HBO stuff, he sounds just like a little kid. Like, and in the show, he's a completely different person, and that's really cool.
yes, it's called acting. As I've been watching more
Yeah,
and more
that's what they
now.
call it acting. But
Yeah,
have you tried
uh,
acting?
yes, but yeah, he's an amazing young man for the talent that he has. Yeah, I was watching something on Instagram today where he was actually going and they were doing the showing the puppets and how large they actually were. Because they mentioned that the puppets in the show were quite large, but he stands next to like the dragon, and the dragon's like a foot, a good head taller than he is. So
Mhm.
they aren't like doing camera tricks to make those things look larger. They're actually creating these things that are quite big. So, and he was very enthusiastic about the behind the scenes and the props and stuff. So that was a cute little video.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's good to see, like, that genuine enthusiasm and, joy that those kind of worlds can bring to people, especially when it's supposed to be a job, but they do have that genuine enthusiasm and love for it. And when we were just talking a minute ago about, it's called acting, reminded me, I heard a story once about Dustin Hoffman when he was on Marathon Man as the lead actor, and Sir Laurence Olivier is also in that, and he's old school, so he's very old school actor. And Dustin Hoffman wants to be all method, and he stayed up awake for like 48 hours or something, and he's trying to do a scene. He can't get through his lines, and he just can't do it. And then, you know, Olivier just comes over and he's like, "Well, I would suggest you try acting in the future." And it started a big fight. But I thought about that because it's like, let's do some acting, maybe.
Did that story come from one Alan Seville? Because feels very much like a Seville
It
story.
does feel Alan Seville. I think it came from somebody else, but it does feel Alan Seville-ish. Yeah.
All right. What are we looking forward to next week? Looks like we're going to be at this tournament the whole time. So, do we think he's actually going to get on the horse and we actually going to get to see the prelims next week, or do we think they're going to drag that out another week?
I think they built it up enough that we have to have something happen in this upcoming week. So I think we do get probably our first fight. So if we're going back to Rocky analogies, this is the fight with Spider Rico or whatever the first guy is that he fights in Rocky. So we'll get some action in there, and we'll get an idea of how competent he may be. And then it might just all be luck. And how the stories get told is that, hindsight after the fact, it's, well, he was the better man and all of this, but we'll get an idea of what that pedigree and history is going to be like after this first round and how he's being used in this whole thing. Because it does feel like he's getting used a little bit, but we don't see that yet.
I think as you were saying that, it kind of popped into my head of they're going so far out of their way to tell us the stories that he tells are mostly true, or they are the versions that he believes to be true, but they're not always reality. And I wonder if
Yeah.
we're going to see that coming forward, where he's going to have 4 pages of deeds, but that's the story that's being told. Maybe he's not as where we may actually end up seeing reality where he doesn't. Maybe he comes in second or third in the tournament, something like that. He doesn't win it, but he's, finishes top 5. Something that would be a decent showing. And then 10 years later, they rewrite it that he won the tournament because he did all these other great things. So I wonder if we're going to see a little bit of that. Of they're already trying to tell us that the past, that history is what people tell you it is versus the reality of the people that live it. Looking at you, America. And I'm wondering if we may see that towards the end of the show, that may end up being the twist of, we all think that he's Rocky and he's going to win, only he's going to lose like the final joust in a knockout or something.
Well, it seems like just from the previews that they've given us that there may be the tournament, there may be something that happens in the tournament, and then it feels like there's going to be more of a 1v1 straight up against one of the Targaryens. So it feels like there may be something outside of the tournament where that might be the Game of Thrones way to couch it, is he doesn't win the tournament, but then, somebody is going to take, umbrage to something that he does, or they just can't handle the way he dealt with something, and they're going to, make sure that they make him pay, and they have him kind of fight one-on-one in this arena against, one of the ruling class, and it's the underdog story there.
Yeah, maybe, yes. Somebody's after their honor, like Zuko, and they're going to have an Agna Kai to sort it all out. I'm going to touch on all genres, all the nerdy stuff as we go through this. I got a feeling.
Well, there's no war on Bossing. What is it? Bossing Bay?
Ba Sing Se.
Ba Sing Se. There you go. See, Doug out nerded me, so there you go.
It's only because I've watched the live action last year, I think. So the remake.
Ooh.
So, but anyway.
Oh,
yes.
I was thinking of the movie. That's a hard watch, Doug. Don't do that to yourself.
No, I've seen the original Last Airbender, and I've seen the first season of the remake, but I have not seen the live action movie, which everybody says is terrible, by M. Night Shyamalan, and I will continue to avoid it.
It's worth your time if you want a bad watch and you're not invested in Avatar. That was the first time I'd actually experienced anything to do with Avatar, and then I went back and I watched the cartoon after the fact, and the cartoon was phenomenal. Oh, that movie is such a train wreck, and it represents none of what the cartoon does. So it's good times. Like, they get the characters' names wrong, Doug. It's the level of the names that I get wrong. So it's not good.
Oof, yeah. Okay. Glad I missed that. That's why its Rotten Tomatoes score is the way that it is, I suppose.
For 100%.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. We will be back next week, probably more like Tuesday. We had to push it a day just for special occasions this week.
It was Doug's birthday.
I know. I'm old. Not as old as I could be, but I'm old. So we'll be back next week, maybe a little bit earlier on in the week to recap the show and kind of see where things go from there. So until next week, thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.